Tonight, we take you to the streets of Eurabia, massive all-Muslim enclaves in European cities, journalism you won't see anywhere else. It's March 1st, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
We spent a week in Denmark, Sweden, and Germany investigating the Million Muslim March through Europe. Of course, it's much more than 1 million Muslim men. That's how many Germany alone took in 2015. Millions more poured across the continent thanks to a European Union idea called the Schengen area, which you can see here in the map in blue, which means once you're in any of the 26 European countries in the Schengen area, you can move to any other country without passport control, no borders. So Germany invited the whole Muslim world to come on in, and the other 25 borderless countries in Europe have been trampled. It's created a crisis that is literally breaking the European Union apart. Here's the Schengen country of Hungary building a fence along its border with Croatia. They're not interested in going along with Angela Merkel's madness. The overwhelming majority of these men aren't real refugees, of course. They're migrants. Some are looking for jobs. Many are looking for welfare, free housing, and other benefits that would be unthinkably luxurious back in their squalid home countries. Some are looking to spread Islam, either through terrorism or merely through building mosques, seeking converts, and pushing for Sharia law, first in Muslim enclaves and then throughout Europe. It's not the first time Islam has marched through Europe. It's just the first time it's marched through unopposed. These men are not refugees. Refugees in a legal sense are people fleeing danger. In a moral sense, refugees are usually women and children and the weak. According to the United Nations, 3/4 of these migrants are young military-age men. They left any vulnerable women and children and seniors behind. This photo tells you all you need to know about the nature of this invasion. 7 able-bodied, well-shod men walking into Europe while a woman with no shoes on, in the rain, carries their bag and 3 kids. You can see there's one kid hanging onto her back, and they're not helping her. In our week in Europe, we spoke to official people, politicians, journalists, activists, but I knew the most interesting would be to speak to the Muslim migrants themselves, which we did in 3 cities. First, in Malmo, Sweden, a city that's almost 50% Muslim and has vast neighborhoods that are 90% Muslim. Second, in Cologne, Germany, site of the mass sexual assault on New Year's Eve. And finally, in the small village of Warburg, Germany, where we found refugees from the refugees, that is, ethnic Kurds and Christian Arabs who fled from the Islamic State to refugee centers in Germany, but who had to flee from those refugee centers in Germany because they were being overrun by Islamic State supporters, threatening them again in Germany itself. So, enough preamble. Over the course of the next half hour, I present to you the Muslim men of the Malmo neighborhood of Rosengarten. Not the most religious men. They wouldn't talk to us. Not any women. They were too busy taking care of their families to lounge around and loiter like the men. But I will tell you what we did see in the daytime at the Central Shopping Center. So stay with us for that and so much more.
Want to have dinner with Faith Goldie? Grab a drink with Brian Lilly. Talk politics with Ezra. You can do it all on the Rebel Cruise. This November, join us for great debates, gourmet meals, and gorgeous scenery as we sail from Fort Lauderdale around beautiful Caribbean islands. It's an intimate week where you can really get to know your favorite Rebel personalities and meet other Rebel lovers too. Space is limited, so visit therebelcruise.ca to sign up now.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta.
Welcome back. Let me tell you first about the shopping center we went to in Malmo, Sweden, in the neighborhood of Rosengarten. A few years ago, it was no different than any mall in Canada. Shops, clothing stores, restaurants, a liquor store. Well, not now. Malls in North America are full of women during the daytime. It's just a fact. Not so in Malmo, Sweden. There were very few women in the mall, and those that were there were hurrying in and out. It was the men who filled the place, lounging around, lingering over a long lunch. Young men just standing around, idle, not in school, not in work. We were there on a Monday, got to the mall at, 2:30 or 3 p.m., but no school or work for these men. But look at the mall itself. Malmo is a city that has traded hands between the Swedes and the Danes going back to the year 1275. But look at the mall. There are some Swedish signs, but just as many in Arabic or other Muslim languages. Look at the faces. The mall security guard who finally told us to leave was the only Swede I saw in the mall itself. How long did that transformation take? Maybe 20 years? Imagine if your city simply replaced its population, replaced its language, replaced its culture in 20 years. You really can't call Malmo, or at least the Rosengarten neighborhood, you can't call it Swedish anymore. I mean, other than from a strictly geographical point of view, it's just not true anymore. Let me show you who I met. Last night I showed you my very first interview at the shopping center, a friendly Somali man who was excited to come to Sweden. He even said he thought Sweden was right to close its borders to unlimited immigration, at least now that he's in. Remember this guy?
What do you think of Sweden bringing in border controls? Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a good idea because they are worrying about they are worrying about their safety, their system, and they have that right. Every nation have a right to prevent and to stop violence in his country or his people.
Friendly fellow, when he started talking about terrorism, he certainly wasn't supportive of terrorism, but he did that trick that I saw Muslims in Paris do after the terrorist attacks there in November. They simply said, well, if it's terrorism, it can't be Muslims by definition, because Muslims would never do terrorism, and if they do terrorism, they're not Muslims. It's a logical circle.
Are you worried about violence from terrorists? Are you worried?
I don't believe what they call Islamic terrorists. I believe terrorists is a terrorist. They are everywhere in this country, no matter which faith or which which color they are.
Yeah, of course, there aren't Jewish or Christian or Hindu or Sikh terrorist groups who have declared war against Sweden and who seek to conquer and dominate the world and every other religion in it, and who have committed tens of thousands of attacks and set up a religious theocracy like the Islamic State has done. It's just not true. It is not true that every religion has its terrorists. That's a form of denial. That's pretending that there is a problem in Islam. But really, why should this young Somali Muslim admit that Islamic terrorism is a problem if most white Western liberals don't admit it, including here in Canada? Now, I was just getting warmed up. I wanted to start off friendly and smiling and non-confrontational. I mean, it was daytime in a shopping center, and I was really chipper and friendly, but still, we had security with us. We didn't need it, but you never know. I mean, just a few days ago, Hollywood star Jude Law, the celebrity, went to a Muslim migrant camp in Calais, Paris, in the west of France, to give a pro-Muslim speech at a refugee camp. And after he left, his staff were beaten up by the migrants. Same thing with Australia's version of 60 Minutes. They went to a Muslim neighborhood in Stockholm, Sweden, And they were beat up too, the journalists. They were hit. They had things thrown at them. They were run over. So yeah, I was going in easy and friendly. So I interviewed this next fellow who said he was studying to be a pilot. He said he was happy to be in Sweden and that he too agreed it was wise for Sweden to close the border.
In recent months, Sweden has had stricter border controls. Do you know what I mean? That they've stopped letting as many people in.
It's very good, yeah.
Why is that good?
Yeah, it's, Sweden, I don't have a lot of people. It's only 9 million, yeah. So they can afford to take all the refugees from all the world. So I think it's right. Yeah.
Even a migrant from Somalia is harder line on open borders than white liberals. Incredible. I was just getting warmed up, and it hit me. Just asking migrants how they're doing and how they like Sweden and chit-chat style questions like that wasn't going to get me anywhere. I mean, it would be pretty odd for someone to say they hated Sweden, or let alone that they were plotting an attack or planning to Islamize the neighborhood. I mean, if someone was like that, they probably wouldn't be talking to me in the first place. And indeed, people who looked very religious by their dress or their beards, they quickly walked by us, declining to speak to us. Now, I showed you this next fellow yesterday. He said he was working at an airport in Austria. I didn't understand what he was doing in Malmo, Sweden, though, until he explained. His wife and 5 kids live for free in Sweden, the result of him shopping around Europe for the best welfare state he could find. And it was a pretty cold day in Malmo that day, a lot colder than in Somalia, but Sweden's lavish freebies, the huge houses, the free schools and healthcare, that's why he planted his family in Sweden. I didn't have the courage to ask him if he had another family in Vienna. Polygamy is legal in Somalia, and I found it odd that a man would choose to be away from his family for so long, but I guess the Swedish taxpayer acts as their sugar daddy, so it's all good.
How do you like being in Vienna?
It is good, but in this country, my wife and my children are live in Malmo, Sweden.
Oh, so your wife and your children, how many children do you have?
I have 5 children in Malmo.
Is Sweden a good place to live?
Yes. I like Sweden.
Now,
It's better for all Europe.
and why is that?
I visited one time in Canada also, but I don't like. I like only Sweden because in Sweden there is big homes, about home. If you are alone, you get in 2 room, 3 room like that. But the other Europe you cannot get. I lived before in Denmark, Germany, Austria, in Switzerland, but you cannot get good house, good home.
So how did you get a good home here? How did that happen?
Because in the society can help you automatically, The other European countries also, they can help you, but in Sweden is more than.
Did you count? He shopped through 5 different European countries before he settled on Sweden. Sorry, that's not a refugee. Now, I saw a woman wearing a niqab walk by with a young man next to her. I thought that was her husband. Turns out it was her son. That's the thing about niqabs. You really have no idea who's under them. It makes it tough to meet people, to make friends, but I think that's the point. See, in Islam, it's about gender apartheid, keeping women away from anyone haram, which means forbidden or dirty in Islam, which of course means other men, but of course it also means unbelievers too. So if you're wearing a niqab, the full face covering, you're not going to make any friends with Swedish citizens. And that's the point, isn't it? If you're replacing the Swedes. We showed you some of this yesterday. Here's a little bit more.
What's your name?
My name is Ibrahim.
And you're born here in Sweden?
I'm born here. Homosexuality, I don't like that. So I don't think that it should be so open.
Do you think the rules should be changed, at least in Muslim areas, like Rosengarten?
A little bit, yes.
Like what kind of rules? Like a hijab, not necessarily a niqab, but maybe a hijab?
Hijab, yes.
How about for gays? I mean, there's some parts of Europe where gays kiss in public and they hold hands in public. Should that be limited? How would you limit that? I don't know how that would be handled.
I don't like that. So I think if they have something between each other, they should do that at home, not in open. To be in the Swedish army is no problem. You can be. But I don't think that you should have a war against your own religion and your own country. To be drunk
Yeah, on alcohol.
on alcohol, it's forbidden in Sharia.
Do you want democracy with people who make law, or do you want a Sharia country where you live by the rules of God?
That is Sharia. I would choose Sharia, yes.
Would you like Sweden to become a Sharia country?
I would like, but now I don't have anything against that it is democracy here in Sweden.
But if you could choose, you would choose
Sharia, yes.
In a way, he was the most terrifying interview I had that day. He was born in Sweden. He spoke English and Swedish quite well. He was actually fairly clean-shaven, wasn't he? Maybe just because he was so young. But calling for a ban on gay men holding hands in public, calling for a ban on alcohol to be served to any Muslim anywhere in Malmo, he said it. And when I specifically asked him about the Islamic State terrorist group, he said no Muslim in the Swedish army should fight against their religion or country. His words. He literally opposed fighting the Islamic State terrorists. Why would he support it, though? I mean, he himself wants to replace Swedish democracy with Sharia law. You heard him. That's the same goal as the Islamic State. In Iraq and Syria, they do it with violence. In Malmo, they just do it with demographics. And I mentioned that there were a lot of young Muslim men just hanging around. I always find that curious. I mean, to me, young men should be in school or working or even playing sports or doing something, just lounging around. It feels a little bit gang-ish, a bit troublemaking-ish. I mean, that's not just the old man in me saying, get off my lawn, you kids. That's the young man I used to be, remembering what ambition and energy felt like when I was 20. I guess me and my friends hung out at the mall too when I was a teenager, but at 3 p.m. in the middle of the day, just loitering, really? Well, sure, I guess. When welfare pays the bills, no need for a part-time job. These young men pretended to be shy, but they were actually riveted by what we were doing. They didn't want to talk on camera, but they watched us talk with others. Fair enough. The one thing I got out of them, though, was they sure don't like gays.
How do you feel about living in a country where so many Swedish women don't wear the hijab, where people are gay, homosexuals hold hands, things like that? How do you feel about that? That's not like Somalia.
No, I know, but the gays, I don't like it.
Are there a lot of gays in Sweden?
Yeah, there's a lot of gays.
And is that against Sharia law?
Yeah.
Hey, do you think there's a gay-straight alliance at that Muslim school in Malmo or any of the madrasas there? Do you think there's a gay pride parade in Malmo? Well, probably in the Swedish enclave, not in Rosengarten. Do you think the concept of human rights for gays even exists in Rosengarten anymore at all in real life? I'm not saying this Somali kid would actually assault a gay man, though I wouldn't want to see an experiment where an openly gay man with gay mannerisms went through this shopping center, and at least not without a lot of security to save him. But that's never the real threat in my mind. I'm not as worried about violence and terrorism in Malmo or here in Canada as I am worried about the slow, sure, steady, relentless Islamization. The Swedish-born man who says he wants to ban gays holding hands in public and wants Sharia law, the Swedish-born Muslim man who says that, and that's the new normal. This Somali man laughing at gays and saying it's unnatural. They're rolling back liberal progressive values, not with guns or bombs or fists, but just by being who they are. Koran-believing Muslims, not secular Swedes. If 5% of your population is Sharia-believing Muslims, that's one thing. What happens when the number is 50%? Or in Rosengarten, 90%? Do you think a gay man would be safe living there in those apartments? Do you think a Jew would be? How about a woman who wore a tank top and shorts on a hot summer's day? Would you really like to test your theory? Like 60 Minutes and Jude Law tried to do. I showed you yesterday this next man, an Albanian Muslim. I showed you very briefly his comments about drug dealing, but I want to play a bit more of my interview for you today, including his story of how he came to Sweden as a teenager, by himself, on a ship. He was saved by the Swedes. And look at how he repays them.
When did you come to Sweden?
2 years ago.
And did you come with your family or on your own?
On our own.
How old are you?
I'm 18.
So you came when you were 16?
Yes.
All by yourself?
Yes.
That's pretty brave.
Yes, it was on a boat
So what do you do now? Where do you live?
here in Rosengarten.
And is your family with you now, or are you still on your own?
We are on our own.
And do you work, or are you a student?
Yes, I work.
What do you do?
I sell weed.
So weed? And what else? Hashish?
Yes,
And who do you sell it to, Muslims or Swedes?
both.
How do you feel about coming to a country and selling drugs when they take you in? Do you think that's a good way to be a Swede?
No,
But if you can do it, why not, I guess, right?
sure. Yes.
Is your family back in Albania?
They are still in Albania, yes.
Do you ever talk to them?
Yes, on the internet.
Are they going to come here too?
Yes.
Now, I understand that Sweden has put up new barriers, new border restrictions. Is it going to be easy for them to come here?
No, I don't think so.
Can you help them come here?
Yes,
How does that work?
I cannot tell you.
It sounds like maybe another boat is coming. Is that right?
Yes.
Well, listen, some people would say that you're not being a very good Swede, that you're selling drugs, and that you're not being a productive citizen. What would you say to them?
F*** off.
F off, he says. But he actually didn't need to say it, did he? Because he lives that message every day. Hey, which is a greater threat in Malmo, do you think? The street crime, the rival gangs, the robberies, the drug dealers, or the Sharia law? Or is it both? Whatever. When I was a kid and I thought of Sweden, I thought of ABBA and IKEA and Volvos and maybe blonde skiers. Progressive, liberal, free, fun, safe. Now it's the rape capital of the world, statistically. Sweden didn't move, still where it always was. But the world was moved into Sweden. Not all the world, not China, not India, not Australia. Muslims moved into Sweden with Islamic values. It's a bit more like living in Somalia or Syria there now. Still ahead, I'll tell you the story about a white Swedish woman in Rosengarten. I'll tell you why it was one of the most sad and shocking stories of all. Stay with us.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Yesterday, I showed you briefly my conversation with this next woman, the only Swedish woman I met in Rosengarten. It really was quite something how much she stood out as being a white woman there. Why would any white woman go there, a Swedish woman, to a Sharia-compliant, all-Muslim zone? What was her business there? Well, in her case, she worked for a delivery company. And anyways, it was her city, wasn't it? She can go anywhere she wants. She'd lived there for years. Well, yes, geographically, it's the same, but not much else. Here is the last interview I'm going to show you today. I'm going to let it run almost unedited. There's so much in here. It made me sad. It made me mad. It made me scared. Here's a woman who was repeating every liberal multicultural cliche she has heard from politicians and the media about how wonderful diversity is and multiculturalism, but it really isn't diverse in Rosengarten, Malmo. It's 90% Muslim. That's not diverse. It's not really multicultural. It's Sharia culture now. The liquor store is gone now, maybe from no customers, maybe from political objections, I don't know. Swedish culture? Not really. But lots of hijabs for sale in the shopping center for when she no longer wants to take hostile stares from Muslim men looking at her as if she's an unclean infidel woman. Here, listen to her serve up every cliche she's ever been told about how wonderful all these migrants will be. As I listened to her, I felt her conviction becoming weaker and weaker in saying these things that she said. I don't know if she believed them. I think they were just words she said to comfort herself, because what else was she going to do? Do you think all of these young men are going to leave or going to go home? Here, listen to our discussion.
Are you from Malmo?
Originally, no.
Where are you from originally?
Mid Sweden.
One of the things we're talking about is migration to Europe, and Malmo seems to have a lot of migrants, especially Muslim migrants. What do you think of that?
I think maybe they should deal with it better, but still we need them.
For what? What does Sweden need them for?
Because Swedish people don't make any babies. And who will take care of us when we are old, if not immigrants?
And how will they take care of you?
Work at, hospitals or, old people homes, stuff like that. Swedish people don't want to clean after other people, so if they don't do it, somebody have to do it.
How about the combination of Muslim culture and Swedish culture? They seem pretty different on things like women's rights and gay rights and things like that.
Hopefully we can turn them around.
And how's that going so far?
I have some colleagues and it's doing fine. No problem at all.
I was talking to some Somali men who tell me that they have a lot of kids, but they're on social assistance, so they're not working.
That's correct.
What it almost, I don't know, and I'm asking you, it seems like some of the migrants are taking social services. They're not going to provide social services to Swedes. Do you think that economics is really going to work out? Like it's costing a lot of money to take care of the migrants, isn't it?
It does, but it's not easy for them to find a job either.
Why do you think they're coming to Sweden? That's very far away. Do you think it's because Sweden is so generous with welfare?
Are you trying to get me to answer your way, or?
You say whatever you want. Tell me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong?
Of course, you read in the magazines all about, the taking our money and works and all that, but it's not easy to get work here. And I think that most of them, if they want to have a job. But if you don't know the language and all that, it's not that easy.
Well, yeah, and especially if you're counting on them to take care of you when you're older, right?
But they will. Because I don't think we will be enough Swedish people to do it.
Can you tell me the best way it's changing Sweden and the worst way it's changing Sweden?
The best way is, I think it's always good to have a mixed culture, How otherwise would we have pizza and pasta in the first place in Sweden? The worst way is probably that the politicians doesn't do it well. They should have been, provided them better.
Now, when I'm from Canada and we think of Sweden, we think of a beautiful, progressive country, and we think of women's rights. But I understand that the number of rapes in Sweden is extremely high. Is that true?
Not what I heard. It's not more than before. During the summer you can have drunk Swedish men as well to do stupid things.
And how about crime in general? Is that a problem?
I don't know. Maybe I'm lucky, but I'm fine.
I want to ask you a question. Are you afraid of being called racist if you criticize migrants? Are you afraid of that?
No, because I'm probably not that aggressive when I criticize, but of course can happen, but I always tell what I want to say, and so far, no problems.
Have you followed the news out of Germany on New Year's Eve in Cologne?
Yeah, a little bit.
What do you think of that?
It's not nice, but still, I think it's still the politicians, they don't do it well. The police does what they're told, and So I think still, politicians. I mean, if they inform people better, I don't think we would have that problems.
So you think that that rape and sexual assault, it's just Sweden and Germany has to do a better job?
Yeah, because I mean, if you give them good values in school and whatever, I think it would have been better. And still, it's easy to blow up because it happens with immigrants, but it happens in other cultures as well.
How do you feel when you see a woman wearing a niqab, like just the little slit for the eyes? I mean, you're a modern Swedish woman. How do you feel when you see another woman wearing that?
As long as it's by free choice, I have no problem with it.
And how would you know if it's by free choice?
I have no clue.
Does it bother you? Do you have any children yourself? Would you want your daughter to dress like that?
I don't have any children, but a lot of friends have children, and let's say if I would have a friend with a daughter and she wanted to convert and she truly believes it, I will be fine with it. But if somebody forced her, I wouldn't be fine.
Do you feel like we're losing ground on gay rights and women's rights?
Hopefully not. I have a lot of gay friends, and they have the same problems that they had before. I think it's better now.
I think the world is better now in the West, but I've talked to a number of Somali men here and Macedonian Muslim men. They don't like gays at all.
No, but they don't do an extreme about it. I mean, look at Russia. I think it's worse there because the regime is against it. Here it's people, so I think it's a big difference.
Is there a limit to the number of Muslim migrants Sweden can take?
No.
So,
a
million a year?
I don't think.
Like that's what Germany's taking.
I don't think it will happen. Not 1 million per year.
What happens if there were more Muslim migrants than there are Swedes? Is that okay?
As long as they follow the law and try to do the best and work hard, why not?
So you have no problem with Swedes being a minority in Sweden?
No. Actually not. As long as it's a good country and you find work and the nature is still beautiful and the weather is like it is and
you don't have any kids anyways, right? No. That's someone else's problem.
No, it's not anyone else's problem. As long as people are nice to each other, it doesn't matter where you live.
I mean, if there were 10 million Somalis here and then they brought in Somali-style law, it wouldn't be Sweden anymore if they brought in Sharia law.
No, I still don't think it will happen. I'm quite sure.
You've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That woman is Sweden personified. No children, so no future. No past either, though. I mean, it's irrelevant. The battles over generations to make Sweden so free. Free first from outside invaders, but free also from internal domination, even by the church. All of those freedoms slipping away in a flash in 20 years. It took Malmo 700 years to become a great city, 700 years to reach its apex, and it's taken just 20 years to slip away so quickly, so irrevocably. Malmo was traded back and forth between Danish and Swedish armies again and again. It was always a prize. But what army could dislodge 100,000 migrant settlers today? And by what right? Sweden invited them in, or at least didn't kick them out when it could. When the Muslim Moors invaded Spain, when the Muslim Turks laid siege to Vienna, those were attacks on the West from the outside, an attempt at homicide, at genocide, at ethnic cleansing by invaders. It was the Quran in action, the jihad, bringing the house of Islam to the house of war, and the West fought back. But this time it's no invasion, it's an invitation. It's not genocide, it's suicide. That Swedish woman says the sky will always be blue and nature will always be beautiful, and that's what's really important. It's true, Sweden's scenery will always be pretty, but for 700 years, Sweden was more than that. But she doesn't care, or at least she pretends not to care. That's all the videos we have for you today, but after the break, your viewer feedback from yesterday's show. And of course, for the rest of the week, we'll show you more original video footage from our exclusive investigation into the phenomenon of mass Muslim migration to Europe. Stay with us. More after these words.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to TheRebel.media/TheMegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out.
Welcome back. Lots of comments about my trip to Europe last week. Valerie Polyak writes, very interesting material. Thank you so much. This is real journalism, something many media are missing badly. Hey, thanks, Valerie. It wasn't particularly dangerous going into Muslim neighborhoods. We went in the daytime. We went to public places. We had a security guard with us, but it was exceedingly politically dangerous. And that's why the CBC and CTV and Toronto Star and Globe and Mail, why they would never do this. They have bigger budgets than us. They have more resources. They could hire security, but they would never ask Muslim migrants about Sharia law or gay rights or if a Muslim Swede should fight against an Islamic State terrorist. Because CBC and CTV and the Globe and the Star, they would not want to show the answers to those difficult questions. The answers show that these migrants do not share the liberal values of the West, the liberal values that the mainstream media claims to support. But the mainstream media would rather cover that up and keep on with the mass migration than have their whole worldview of multiculturalism and open borders be challenged. Rick Plesnick writes, doubt it will take 10 years for problems to surface in Canada based on how hurriedly the Libranos are importing potential terrorists and a non-assimilating Islamic population into the country. Islam has never lived in peace in any country it had migrated to. Look it up. It is a matter of history. Thanks for your letter. There are some places where Islam lives in peace, in Singapore, but that's because of a very firm hand by the benign dictatorship there regulating Islamic political activity. And Turkey, for a long time after Kemal Ataturk, became a secularized, Western-oriented society, at least partway. But of course, that's being undone by their President Erdogan. Lebanon, for years, coexisted, alternating a Christian and a Muslim prime minister, but that stasis was destroyed by the PLO's invasion and then by the Syria Hezbollah invasion. Muslims in East Africa, especially Ismaili Muslims, integrated very well and were liberal and were professional. They were kicked out by Idi Amin, the madman, but Ismaili Muslims are a tiny, tiny minority in Islam. Many other Muslims don't even consider them to be truly Muslims. So it's true. It's hard to find a place where Muslim migrants assimilate, certainly not on a large scale, which is because much of Islam is political Islam. It's not personal. It's not merely religious. It's not just about commanding your own heart and mind. It's about commanding the public square. And that's why. Now, Revelation writes, that woman from Somalia yesterday, Mona, is actually an activist. I've heard her story before. She travels back to Somalia and tells women what's actually in the Quran, and she's now a wanted woman as a result. Great show, Ezra. Fascinating you have fans over there. One starts to wonder how many others you have in such countries. Well, thanks for your feedback. Mona Walter has truly become an activist. You're right, which is incredible. Imagine how much strength and courage that would have taken. Going from being a teenager, a Somali woman, teenager, migrating from Somalia to Sweden, and then taking on your own family, taking on your own mosque, taking on your own community, and finally taking on your own entire religion. Talk about strength and courage and vision. Now, such a woman would be receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, or other high public honors if she were taking on the Christian patriarchy or some corporate bully. But because she's taking on Islamic bullies, even in her own mosque, she's ignored and marginalized and forgotten by feminists and other progressive activists. And that's the best case scenario, let's be honest. They don't just ignore her, they actively hate her because she's showing them up by their silence. Well, that's our show for today. For the rest of the week, we will bring you more videos from our trip to Europe. We were there for 5 days, but oh my gosh, did we do a lot. Copenhagen, Malmo, back to Copenhagen, back to Malmo, back to Copenhagen, up to Stockholm, quickly through Berlin, to Cologne and to Voorburg, and then back to Canada, all in 1 week. My head was spinning the whole time. There's so much to show you, so many lessons to learn. I'm glad I was there to see with my own eyes. There are shades of gray here, there certainly are. There are some lambs who are migrating to Europe amidst the wolves, but there is so much wrong in Europe. And simply to be able to talk about it and show it feels like a breakthrough, because in Canada, the mainstream media is as uniform and disciplined on this issue as their masters in the Liberal Party itself. They will not acknowledge that any problems exist with mass, unvetted, unlimited Muslim migration to the West. I'm showing you every day that there are indeed problems, at least for anyone who cares about our Western liberal traditions. That's it from me. I'd love to hear your feedback on today's show. Send me an email to Ezra at TheRebel.media. Tweet me at Ezra Levant, or you can obviously post on Facebook or on our website itself. We've got so much more in the days ahead. Make sure you come back. I'm Ezra Levant for The Rebel. Keep fighting for freedom while you still can.